Aaron liked the woods before sunrise. There was a softness to that hour, a kind of suspended quiet that felt older than the day itself. The world not yet committed to light, the air cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of pine and soil and something metallic beneath it, the quiet promise of morning. He moved steadily along the narrow trail, boots pressing into earth that still held the night's chill. A rifle rested against his shoulder, familiar and balanced. The strap cut across his chest, the small pack on his back shifted gently with each step. He had hunted here before. Not often, but enough to know the terrain, enough to trust it. The trees were tall and thin, stretching upward into a pale grey sky that hadn't decided whether it would brighten or remain clouded. Birds stirred overhead, not yet singing, just shifting, testing the air. Aaron adjusted the brim of his cap and slowed as the path thinned into brush. This is where deer tended to cross at first light, a shallow dip in the land where water collected after rain. He crouched briefly, touching the ground. The soil was soft, undisturbed. He stood again and scanned the tree line. Everything felt normal. The woods had their own rhythm, a low hum of distant insects, the subtle creak of branches swaying in a breeze too light to feel against skin, the occasional rustle of something small moving through leaves. He stepped forward again, careful now, slower. Sunlight began filtering in faint strands, catching in the mist that lingered between trunks. It painted the forest in pale silver lines, giving everything a slightly dreamlike distance. Aaron liked that feeling. Out here the world reduced itself to simple things: breath, sound, movement, patience. He paused near a fallen log and leaned lightly against it, listening. A twig snapped somewhere off to his right. He turned his head slowly, not reacting too quickly. Animals moved all the time, that was part of it. He waited. Nothing followed. No second snap. No movement of brush, just stillness returning to its previous shape. He exhaled quietly. Probably a squirrel. He adjusted his grip on the rifle and continued, moving deeper now where the trees grew closer together, and the ground dipped slightly toward a narrow stream. As he walked, he noticed something else. The birds weren't singing. They were there. He could see them shifting in the canopy, but they weren't calling. It wasn't silence, just restraint. He slowed again. The forest still looked right. It smelled right, still felt right beneath his boots. And yet beneath the calm surface, something had shifted. Not enough to name, not enough to fear, just enough to notice. Aaron kept walking, deeper. Aaron found the rock without looking for it. It sat beside the narrow game trail, flat on top and slightly raised from the surrounding soil. The kind of place someone might rest a hand while tying a boot, or set something down briefly. He almost stepped right past it. Then he noticed the grey dust. At first it looked like nothing more than dry dirt. The forest floor was full of muted colours, browns, greys, pale greens, but this was different. It sat too neatly on the flat surface, undisturbed by wind. Aaron crouched slowly. The ash was fresh. He didn't need to touch it to know. It still held its shape in a small cone, delicate and powdery. No dew clung to it, no dampness from the morning mist. The surrounding leaves were wet. The rock itself carried a thin sheen of moisture, but the ash was dry. He scanned the ground nearby. A cigarette butt lay in the grass beside the trail, partially crushed but not fully flattened. The filter was clean at the edge, barely stained. Recently put out. Aaron straightened slightly, eyes moving through the trees. He had seen no other truck in the parking area at dawn. He could have waited. This part of the forest wasn't popular for casual hikers. Too dense, too quiet. Hunters came here, but they usually made their presence known. Orange vests, loud footsteps, the occasional cough or clearing of a throat to signal awareness. He had heard nothing. He picked up the cigarette butt and rolled it between his fingers. It was still firm, not waterlogged, not softened by time. He set it back down exactly where it had been. The woods around him remained still. A thin breeze passed through the upper branches, but it didn't reach the forest floor. The leaves at eye level didn't move. Aaron listened. There were sounds, distant birds shifting, a faint rustle deeper in the brush, but nothing close, nothing immediate. He rose slowly, feeling the quiet settle differently around him now, not louder, not darker, just aware. He looked at the rock again. The ash sat there patiently, as if it had been placed for him to find, not discarded, not careless, intentional. Aaron glanced down the trail ahead, then back the way he'd come. He tried to picture someone standing there at first light, smoking in silence while watching the path. He didn't like the image. He stepped forward again, moving off the trail slightly, testing the brush. The forest accepted him without resistance. But as he walked, he became conscious of something subtle. The air no longer felt empty. It felt shared. And somewhere behind him, not close enough to hear, not close enough to see, something adjusted its distance. Aaron moved a little farther down the trail before stopping again. The trees were thicker here, their trunks closer together, the ground uneven with roots and low brush. He had found a fallen tree angled just enough to serve as a seat and lowered himself onto it carefully. He set his rifle beside him and shrugged his pack from his shoulders. The forest had settled again, not silent, but muted. He unzipped the top compartment slowly. The sound of fabric teeth separating seemed louder than it should. He reached inside for his thermos, fingers brushing against metal and canvas. And that was when he heard it. A soft shift in the brush, not ahead of him, not behind him, but to his right. He froze, hand still inside the bag. It hadn't been a crash or scramble. Not an animal bolting. It was measured, a single displacement of leaves, as if something had adjusted its footing. Aaron withdrew his hand slowly and let it rest on the edge of the pack. He listened. Nothing followed. The trees held their positions. The distant canopy stirred faintly. Somewhere further off, a bird gave a tentative call and then stopped. He turned his head slightly toward the sound, eyes scanning the darker gaps between trunks. The undergrowth was dense, ferns and thin saplings layered over each other in tangled patterns. If something stood there, it would not be easy to see. Aaron picked up the thermos deliberately and unscrewed the lid. He coughed once, a quiet, casual sound, nothing aggressive. He waited. For a long moment there was nothing. Then from deeper in the same direction came a faint disturbance. Not the same sound, but close, a careful step. He felt his shoulders tighten. Animals usually didn't pause like that. Animals startled, animals fled or froze. This felt like adjustment, like a correction. Aaron closed the thermos without drinking and slipped it back into the pack. He stood slowly, lifting the rifle with a controlled movement, not raising it, just holding it ready. The woods in front of him looked unchanged. Still grey-green, still layered in mist, still ordinary. He took a single step forward. There was no immediate response. He took another. The forest absorbed the movement. But as he shifted his weight to continue walking, he heard it again. To the right, a matching step. Not hurried, not heavy, just enough to mirror him. Aaron stopped. The sound stopped. He could feel it now. Not exactly fear, but alignment. Like two lines running side by side. He looked into the trees until his eyes began inventing shapes. Nothing moved, nothing revealed itself, but the air felt narrower, as if something had chosen a distance and was keeping it. Aaron didn't move for a long time after the second step matched his own. He stood there with the rifle resting low against his thigh, eyes angled towards the brush on his right, listening not just for the movement but for intention. The forest looked the same as it had minutes earlier. Pale, morning light filtered through the leaves. Mist thinning between the trunks. The world was returning to its quiet routine, and yet the air felt tightened, like fabric pulled just slightly too taut. He told himself it would be an animal, a cautious deer pacing him, a stray dog, even another hunter keeping distance out of courtesy. But courtesy usually announced itself. He cleared his throat softly, not a deliberate call, just the kind of sound a man makes when he's alone in the woods. The sound felt small in open air. He waited. 10 seconds passed, maybe 15. Then from deeper in the brush, slightly further back than before, came the same sound. A throat clearing. Not identical, close enough that it did not belong to wind or animal. It wasn't loud, it wasn't mocking, it was careful, measured, as though someone had heard him and taken a moment to recreate it. Aaron's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight slowly and turned his head just a fraction more towards the trees, scanning the spaces between branches where a person might stand half hidden. The undergrowth was thick, a lattice of stems and shadows, and it would not take much to remain unseen, especially if you knew how to hold still. He felt a ribbon of sweat begin to cool beneath his shoulder blades. There was no snapping of twigs now, no obvious approach or retreat, just presence, a maintained distance, a deliberate parallel. He stepped forward once, the leaves brushed beneath his boot. A few seconds later from the right came the faintest echo of displacement, as if someone had mirrored the movement but with care, placing their foot down gently to avoid sound. That was when the realization fully settled into him. Not panic, not yet, but understanding. Animals did not imitate. Animals did not pause and respond in kind. This was someone who wanted him to know. Not enough to confront, not enough to reveal themselves, just enough to confirm alignment. Aaron did not raise the rifle. He didn't call out. Instead, he stood very still, eyes fixed ahead now rather than into the brush, as if refusing to give the hidden figure the satisfaction of a search. The forest continued around them both. Birds shifted again in the canopy, testing their voices but never quite committing to song, and the morning light grew stronger, illuminating the trees in pale silver while leaving the spaces between them shadowed and deep. Whoever was out there did not move closer. They simply remained, matching and waiting. Aaron did not intend to look down. He had been scanning the tree line again, forcing himself to fixate on the right side where the imitation had come from. Then something pale and irregular caught his eye near the edge of a clearing. He stepped closer. The ground there dipped into a shallow, muddy stretch where recent rain had pooled and receded, leaving a thin skin of damp earth over the packed soil. Tufts of grass bent outward along the edges, nothing unusual at first glance. Then he saw them. Impressions, clear enough to be deliberate. He crouched slowly, the rifle balanced loosely in his grip as his other hand hovered over the nearest mark without touching it. Footprints. They were fresh. The edges were still sharp, not yet softened by wind or insects. Aaron's first instinct was to glance behind him, to check his own tracks, to confirm he had not somehow circled back without noticing. His boots had left patterned impressions, deep squared edges, predictable. These were similar, but they were not his. He studied them closely. They were roughly his size, maybe a little narrower. The prints splayed slightly outward, as if the person walked without haste, comfortable with the ground beneath them. The prints did not wander randomly through the clearing. They formed a line, parallel to his own path, keeping distance. He swallowed. There were no signs of disturbance leading to or from them, no snatched branches nearby, no dragged brush. Whoever had made them had moved carefully, stepping where the mud would hold shape but not splash, not betray excess movement. And then he noticed something else, the direction. The footprints were angled not toward him, but slightly inward, as if whoever walked there had been turned just enough to face him while moving, walking sideways, watching. Aaron's pulse shifted into a slower, heavier rhythm. Not the sharp spike of surprise, but the weight of realization settling into bone. No one walked this deep in the woods, not like this, not in early morning cold. He scanned the perimeter again, eyes tracing the darker pockets between the trees where a body might stand concealed, where breath might be held. The forest remained outwardly indifferent. A faint breeze skimmed at the tops of the grasses. A bird cut across the canopy. Somewhere distant, a branch gave a small, isolated crack. He looked back down. The last footprint in the line stopped abruptly at the edge of firmer ground where the mud ended. There were no returning prints, no turn, no continuation, just absence, as though the person had stepped out of the earth itself. Aaron remained crouched for several seconds, staring at the final impression, aware now of something deeper than pursuit. This wasn't a hunter tracking him. It was someone keeping pace, someone studying, someone who had chosen to leave just enough behind so they could prove they could. Aaron did not want to use the radio. Something about speaking into open air felt like an invitation now, like announcing himself in a place that had already proven it was listening too closely. But standing there beside the fading prints, with the forest pressing inward and the sense of alignment tightening around him, silence felt worse. He straightened slowly and lifted his handheld radio from the pack strap, thumb brushing the worn edge of the transmit button. The mountains loomed pale in the distance, sharp edges cutting into washed-out sky, the world looking wide and open and harmless, as though nothing strange could survive in so much daylight. He brought the radio to his mouth. The voice came out steady, but lower than usual. He first gave his location, then his name, then a brief neutral explanation. Possible trespasser. Tracks, unclear intent. He kept it practical, kept it controlled. The forest absorbed his words. He released the button and held the device near his ear. Static answered. Not the usual thin hiss of distance or interference from terrain, but something thicker, layered, a granular wash of sound that seemed to pulse faintly, as if something inside the signal were trying to organize itself. He adjusted his stance, angling the radio higher, searching for clearer reception the way he had done dozens of times before in these hills. He pressed transmit again, repeating himself. This time he waited longer before releasing the button, listening even as he spoke, half expecting something to overlap him. For a moment there was nothing but wind brushing through the upper branches. Then the static shifted. It dipped lower, almost quiet, and beneath it, not loud, not sharp, came a strict sound that did not belong to the open channel. Breathing. Slow. Measured. Not his. Aaron froze without meaning to. His own breath stalled in his chest as he listened harder, straining to separate imagination from signal. The breathing did not respond to his movement. It did not accelerate. It did not falter. It simply continued. He lowered the radio slightly and glanced towards the tree line again, scanning for a figure stepping forward to reveal the joke. There was nothing. The radio crackled once more, and then beneath the static a faint distortion of sound, something almost like his own voice, stretched thin, played back half a second behind him. He lifted the device again, pressing the transmit button without speaking. The breathing stopped immediately. Dead silence. He released the button, the breathing resumed. Not closer, not further, just present. Aaron felt the space around him contract, as if the forest were no longer wide, but arranged deliberately, each tree positioned to narrow his world into a corridor he had not chosen. Someone was not just following him, someone was tuned to him, and the signal did not seem to be travelling outward. It felt like it was circling back. Aaron did not realise he had begun walking faster until he found himself slightly winded. He hadn't made the decision consciously. His body had simply chosen a moment over stillness, pushing him forward through the thinning trees, away from the clearing and the place where the footprints ended without explanation. The radio now hung silent against his chest, its earlier distortion lingering in his mud, like an aftertaste he couldn't rinse away. He angled left, cutting toward a denser line of trees where the terrain rose gently, reasoning that the elevation meant visibility, and visibility meant control. That was when he saw it. At first it looked like a natural split in the bark, a long scar where the lightning might have once struck, or a branch had torn away in the wind, but something about the symmetry stopped him. He slowed. The tree stood alone in the narrow patch of open ground, the trunk pale against the darker brush. The bark had been cut, not gouged, not hacked, but cut. He stepped closer, leaning in as though proximity would change what he was seeing. The mark was deliberate. A long vertical line, clean and narrow, running down the trunk, roughly chest height. At its midpoint, two shorter slashes angled outward on either side, subtle but precise. It was not a symbol he recognised from trail markers or hunting tags. It wasn't crude vandalism, there was care in it, care and patience. He reached out, fingers brushed the surface lightly. The light was fresh. Sap still glistened faintly along the edge, sticky and bright against the rough bark. The wood beneath was pale and exposed, the colour of bone. Aaron pulled his hand back slowly. This had not been here long. He circled the tree once, scanning the ground for more prints, more evidence of someone standing here long enough to carve with that level of steadiness. Nothing obvious. The undergrowth remained mostly undisturbed, leaves lying naturally where they had fallen. Whoever had made the mark had not fidgeted, had not paced. They had approached, carved, left. He stepped back several feet, taking the whole trunk into view. The shape struck him again, a deeply gouged vertical line. It wasn't random. It was suggestive. The realization made his skin tighten. He glanced down at himself instinctively, noting his own stance, the way his shoulders angled slightly outward beneath the weight of his pack, the rifle strap crossing diagonally. Then he looked back at the carving. The central line aligned almost exactly with where his spine would be if he stood directly in front of it. He shifted slightly to the right. He saw two angled cuts that seemed to mirror the way his arms hung when relaxed. Aaron felt the ground tilt subtly beneath him, not physically, but in certainty. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't territorial. It wasn't a message meant for strangers. It was observational. Someone had watched him long enough to study his outline, long enough to replicate it, and long enough to leave it here ahead of him, waiting. The forest remained quiet, but it no longer felt wide. It felt arranged. Aaron broke from the trees without fully deciding to. The carved trunk had shifted something in him, turned the forest from terrain into architecture, and the instinct that rose next was simple and odd. Get into the open. The brush thinned abruptly, giving way to a wide stretch of pale grassland that rolled gently toward the mountains. The sky was vast and exposed above it. For a moment the sudden brightness felt so disorientating after the compressed shade of the trees. Wind skimmed across the field in long, visible sweeps, bending the grass in slow waves that moved outward like breath. He stepped into it cautiously, scanning the edges behind him. Nothing followed. No figure broke from the tree line. No movement betrayed pursuit. The forest stood still and dense, its border dark and even, as though it had drawn a line and chosen not to cross it. Amber moved further into the clearing, boots pressing into the dry earth. He didn't run. Running would mean panic, and panic meant loss of judgment. He walked steadily, deliberately, angling toward a low rise that would give him a wider view. The wind grew stronger the further he moved into the trees, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant snow. Above him several birds circled against the clouded sky, their silhouettes drifting lazily as if nothing below concerned them. He reached the crest of the rise and turned slowly in a full circle. From here he could see everything. The forest edge curved in a wide arc behind him, the grasses stretched outward in muted tones. The mountain stood cold and indifferent in the distance. No movement, no figure pacing the perimeter, no sudden shift in shadow, just open land. And yet the sensation did not ease, if anything it deepened, because out here there was nowhere to hide, which meant whoever had been following him was either no longer following or no longer behind him. A slow, deliberate thought formed in his mind, unwelcome and persistent. In the trees something had kept to his right. In the clearing there was no right side, no concealment, no parallel line to walk. Aaron's grip tightened on the rifle without his permission. He listened. The wind moved across the field in long strokes, bending in the grass in patterns that were almost symmetrical, almost intentional. Then faintly from somewhere within the open expanse, not from the forest, not from the sky, came a sound. A step, not heavy, not rushed, just a single shift of weight against dry earth. And it did not come from behind him, it came from somewhere ahead, in the open, where nothing stood. Aaron didn't see it all at once. At first it was only a disturbance in the horizon line, a vertical interruption where the pale grass met the dark wall of trees. His eyes moved past it twice before recognition settled in. Someone was standing there. Far across the clearing, just inside the shadow of the opposite tree line, the distance made details impossible. The body was a dark shape against darker trunks, its edges softened by drifting grass and shifting light, but the outline was human, upright, still, not hiding, waiting. Aaron's throat tightened. The figure wasn't facing him directly. It stood angled slightly away, as if watching something off to the side, as if Aaron were not the primary focus at all. That unsettled him more than confrontation would have. He lifted the rifle halfway, not aiming, just preparing. The figure did not react. A gust of wind rolled through the field, bending the grass in a wide arc that moved between them like a wave. When the grass dipped low again, the figure had changed position. Not dramatically, just enough. It was no longer at the edge of the trees. It stood several feet forward into the clearing. Aaron was certain it hadn't walked. He hadn't seen movement. The shift was simply there. He swallowed and stepped sideways to get a clearer angle. The ground crunched beneath his boot. Across the field the figure lowered its head slightly, as if examining something near its own feet. Not him, the earth. Then slowly, deliberately, it turned its head toward the mountains behind Aaron. Not towards Aaron himself, past him, like it was measuring distance, calculating. Aaron felt something colder than fear settle into his chest. The figure wasn't copying him. It wasn't reacting to him. It was positioning. Another gust moved through the grass. For half a second the figure became a blur of pale motion. When it cleared, the figure was closer again. Not charging, not striding, just nearer. Still, silent. Still angled slightly away, as if it were walking a path that Aaron could not see. And that was when he realized something worse than being followed. The figure wasn't pacing him, it was moving toward where he was going. And it had started long before he stepped into the clearing. The ridge broke into gravel and a thin stretch of road carved between stone and scrub. And there it was, his truck, exactly where he had left it in the morning, angled slightly towards the drop, tires dusted pale from the climb. The sight of it should have settled something in him. Metal, engine, weight, something solid and predictable in a landscape that had become anything but. Instead, he stopped walking. The passenger door was open. Not wide, hanging crooked, just open enough to be deliberate. Aaron stood very still, watching it from a distance, as if it might move again on its own. He knew he had closed it. He could see the moment clearly. Keys pocketed, door shut in a firm push, a habitual tug on the handle to confirm the lock. He did it every time. He didn't skip it. He didn't forget. The interior light cast a faint glow inside the cab, visible even in the washed daylight. It made the truck look occupied, like someone had stepped out and intended to return. The wind slid across the ridge in steady strokes, brushing the open door so that it shifted slightly on its hinges, a slow, shallow movement. Not enough to slam, just enough to remind him it was not fixed in place. He scanned the surrounding rocks first. No vehicle behind his. No footprints obvious in the gravel from the distance. No person leaning casually against the far side waiting to explain. The clearing around the truck was empty, too empty. Aaron approached carefully, not rushing, not crouching either, just walking in a straight line as if daring the scene to correct itself. Each step sounded louder than it should have on the gravel. When he reached the truck, he didn't immediately touch it. He angled his body away so he could see through the windshield first. The driver's seat was exactly where he had left it. Gear on the floor, map folded on the passenger side. Nothing overturned, nothing stolen. Nothing obviously disturbed. He moved slowly toward the open door and stopped just outside it. The interior smelt the same: dust, fabric, faint oil. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no scratches along the frame. The door simply stood open, as if it had been unlocked from the inside. Aaron rested one hand lightly against the metal edge and felt the residual warmth from the morning sun. The truck had been here alone, all day, waiting. He closed the door gently. It latched without resistance. And for a brief second, a quiet, fragile second, the world felt almost normal again. When he reached for the handle to test the lock, it clicked, unlocked, from the inside. He didn't notice it at first. He's too focused on the door, the lock, the impossible detail of it being unsecured from the inside. His hand is still resting on the handle when something inside the cab pulls his eye downward. On the driver's seat, carefully placed, 3 twigs laid parallel, evenly spaced, deliberate. Across them a strip of bark, balanced neatly like a crossbeam, and resting on top of it, covering the bark almost completely, a folded scrap of paper. The arrangement is small, quiet, controlled. It doesn't look rushed. It doesn't look like mockery. It looks intentional. Aaron stares at it without moving, as if movement might disturb something fragile. He knows the shape. Before he even understands why, his brothers used to build them when they were children. Little markers in the woods behind their house, 3 sticks and a crosspiece. Their version of a trail sign, and they played at getting lost. They would build them at crossroads in the trees, laughing about explorers in secret codes. They stopped doing that when they grew older. No one else knew about it, no one else cared. Aaron reaches into the cab slowly and lifts the folded paper. The twigs do not shift, the bark stays balanced beneath. His fingers feel strangely numb as he unfolds the note. The handwriting is not rushed, not scribbled. Block letters, careful, centered. Aaron. And beneath it, 1757. No date, no message, just his name and a time. Aaron doesn't understand the time at first. It sits there simple and ordinary until a memory stirs. Not memory exactly, but sensation. He looked down at his wrist, his watch. The second had stopped hours ago, after catching against the rock during climb. He never reset it. He never needed to. The face reads 1757. It hasn't moved since. The wind moves softly through the ridge behind him. The truck's interior hums faintly. He does not feel watched. He feels accounted for. The note trembles slightly in his hand, not from the wind, but from the slow sensation that this wasn't left hours ago. It was left at a moment, a specific one, a moment that already happened. The image of the paper lingers in his mind as the scene softens. The bold letters, the clean spacing, the absolute calm of it. Aaron, 1757. And then it fades. The white of the page dissolves into the pale tone of his face. Close. Too close. His eyes are wide but not wildly so. Not panic, not hysteria. Something colder. Recognition. Understanding without explanation. Behind him the forest is silent. Not empty. Just finished.